As you may know, Deltarune is the spiritual successor to Undertale, taking many of the familiar ideas and using them as a foundation for an entirely new story Toby has wanted to tell us for years. While the two games share a recognizable art style and plenty of recurring faces, Deltarune isn't interested in recreating what came before. Instead, it takes everything Undertale did well and expands on it. You can already see the evolution in the visuals. At first glance, the sprites may not seem all that different, but the longer you play, the more obvious the improvements become. Environments are richer with detail, animations are smoother, and every chapter has its own distinct visual identity that makes each new location instantly memorable. That same evolution carries over into the world itself. Undertale's setting was intentionally intimate. Nearly the entire adventure took place within a single underground kingdom, allowing the story to focus on one tightly connected journey and a relatively small cast of characters. Deltarune goes in a completely different direction, however. Instead of telling one story through a single kingdom, it takes a much bigger question. What if every ordinary place could hide an entirely different civilization beneath it? That idea comes from a classic fantasy trope, an ordinary world giving way to a hidden fantastical one. Stories like Alice in Wonderland, The Chronicles of Narnia, The Wizard of Oz, and even films like Spirited Away all invite their characters into strange places governed by completely different rules. It's a concept that's been around for generations, but Deltarune puts its own spin on it. Rather than transporting its characters to a distant magical realm, it transforms the ordinary objects around them into a foundation of an entirely new, different world. That's what makes every Dark World feel so exciting. Each one introduces its own aesthetic and culture, yet they're never random. Every world is built around something from the Light World, letting you appreciate both the creativity behind the transformation and the clever connections back to reality. It's the balance between familiarity and the imagination that keeps every chapter feeling fresh. And that naturally leads us to question something. How do these Dark Worlds actually work? Well, according to Queen, a dark fountain is the source that gives a dark world its form. When a lightner channels their determination into a sharp object and pierces the ground, causing darkness to pour through the surrounding area and give birth to an entirely new world. At first, that sounds like a pretty simple explanation, but the more you learn about Dark Worlds, the more fascinating they become. Because they aren't just magical dimensions, they're reflections of the Light World itself. If you want a much deeper analysis of how they function, I'd highly recommend watching Nighthawk's video on the subject. One idea from this video that really stuck with me is viewing Dark Worlds as a works of art. Creative expressions brought to life by Lightners. One interpretation I've always liked is that they may have always existed in some form, even before a Dark Fountain was ever opened. Not physically beneath the Light World, but almost as reflections waiting to be brought to life. It simply gives those reflections a place to exist. That would explain why so many Darkners talk about events that seem to happen long before. Characters like Ram still remember experiences before Chapter 3. It suggests that Darkners may continue to experience the passage of time through whatever happens to their corresponding objects in the Light World. Because of that, Toby can reinvent the setting with every chapter while still following consistent rules. The possibilities are seemingly endless. I think the best way to see through that is the character designs. Nearly every resident of Chapter 1 is exactly what you'd expect from a kingdom born from playing cards. Rudens resemble diamond cards, Sea-Round transforms a simple checker piece into a hulking armored enemy, Jigsawries are literally just walking jigsaw puzzles, and Pawnmen resemble little toy soldiers straight out of a child's board game. Looking at Sham a little bit more closely, they're supposed to be a worn-out stuffed plush stitched together with loose seams and patches, yet that appearance says so much about their role in the story. Despite looking like an old forgotten toy, they're one of the most knowledgeable characters in the entire game, quietly guiding Chris and the others around the mystery of shadow crystals. It's such a clever contrast, taking something so soft and comforting and turning it into an almost omniscient and mysterious shopkeeper. Cyberworld takes that same approach in a completely different direction. Instead of cards and toys, everything revolves around software and the internet. The Addisons are literal walking advertisements. Virrovakirans, I don't know how to say their names right, is a living computer virus, and Task Manager is an orderly software assistant who manages her tasks like tasks running on a computer. That's why her name is Task Manager, literally. The ruler of it all is Queen herself, designed around a giant computer monitor whose face behaves like a digital display. Even her role as a ruler feels fitting. She's quite literally the one running the computer world. I also love how consistent this chapter stays with its ideas. The plug boys are exactly what they sound like. Electrical plugs brought to life. Later in chapter 3, we see that continuation in some way through the shopkeeper himself. Let's talk about the more unique and complex designs that were in the game, for example. Tenna is on paper just an old CRT television, but his design completely commits to that concept. His body has this chunky, low polygon, almost like he stepped straight out from an old PlayStation game. The pixelated textures, stiff movements, and retro presentation all reinforce the feeling that he's a relic from another era of entertainment. But the reason why he's also so big is because his light world counterpart makes him also look larger than the other objects surrounding its room. Even the enemies continue that same television theme. La Niña and El Niña reinterpret colorful weather forecast graphics into expressive darkeners, making the entire chapter feel like you're trapped inside an old television station. Chapter 4 shifts the gears a bit, but it keeps the same creative mindset. The organics are some of my favorite designs because they perfectly capture the Citadel's musical atmosphere. Their appearance blend naturally with the grand choir aesthetic, turning instruments themselves into living characters. Now that chapter 5 is out, I might as well talk about these guys because I think they're one of the best examples of what makes these character designs so good. Let's talk about the 7 flowers. At first glance, they just look like colorful flowers turned into anime-inspired characters. But once you realize each one represents one of Undertale's human soul traits, the designs become so much more interesting because they constantly play with your expectations. Yellow still embraces the cowboy look associated with justice, but gives it this lanky charm with a bit of awkwardness. I can see why he looks so similar to Woody in a way. Green represents kindness through a quiet chef rather than a stereotypical healer. Blue still continues on being a ballerina and very grounded-like, with integrity, but I originally did think he was going to be a girl, but realized how much better it was for representation to see someone like this. Aqua completely subverts patience by becoming an energetic, carefree child instead of someone who appears calm all the time. There's a nerdy scientist like Seth, and Orange might be my favorite subversion because instead of making Bravery an intimidating warrior, Deltarune makes Orange a tiny mouse. It's funny at first, but it also says something about bravery itself. Being brave isn't about looking strong, it's about choosing to be courageous even when you aren't. And of course, flowery. All of this culminates into making each one of them so unique to one another, kind of basing them off simple tropes. They're cartoonish, every character is built around a strong silhouette and exaggerated proportions. Before they even speak, you can usually tell what kind of personality they have by just looking at them. The same reason like series such as Mario and Pokemon have remained so iconic for decades. Their characters aren't memorable because they're realistic, they're memorable because they're simple, expressive, and colorful. I think that's why its art direction stands out so much. Every location builds naturally from the objects that already exist in the light world, depending on which are the most common. The ideas were already there. The same pattern appears throughout the rest of the game. A room full of computers becomes a sprawling cyberpunk metropolis, but there are also a lot of variables that come into play, especially depending on the lightener who creates the fountain. So far, we've mostly seen the Knight or Chris open them, both whom seem to possess an incredibly strong imagination, allowing them to create fully realized dark worlds. Susie's by comparison appears much more disordered and uneven. Chapter 5 introduces another interesting twist, however. At first, its dark world feels nostalgic, almost like a callback to Chapter 1 with its familiar gardens. But the deeper you explore, the more that idea changes. The world gradually shifts into a distinctly Japanese-inspired setting filled with traditional architecture that doesn't immediately match the room itself. Considering the book's Alphys gave Asgore alongside the figurine around it, I think I could be wrong about my understanding. Instead, it may also be influenced by the things that carry the strongest memories or emotional significance to the person creating it. This has inspired so many possibilities for the community, inspiring people to come up with their own ideas and interpretations while expanding their own creative horizons. Cusicles is an amazing example of this, and one of the few Deltarune fan creators who really made the series feel like it had a life of its own. Long before Chapter 3 through 5 were released, she poured so much passion into creating her own fan-made interpretations of each chapter. They were never meant to predict what Toby Fox was going to do, but rather celebrate the possibilities of what could happen. And I think that's what made it so special. The artists, musicians, and writers who worked on those projects all brought their own unique ideas and inspirations to the table, using Deltarune's world building as a foundation to build something completely original. Instead of simply copying the game, they expanded on it, proving just how flexible these ideas really are. I can honestly say the same thing when it comes to music. Back during Undertale's peak, fan music often revolved around Megalovania. As much as I love the track, I'll admit I've gotten really tired of it over and over again. Deltarune, on the other hand, has encouraged musicians to branch out. Instead of recreating one iconic song, creators began imagining what future chapters might sound like, composing entirely original battle themes, area themes, and character motifs years before those chapters were even released. Some of those fan-made tracks are genuinely incredible, and in my opinion, they're some of the best what could have been pieces of music of the community has ever produced. Because of that, I want to give a shout out to a lot of those creators in the description below. The amount of work, passion, and talent they've poured into these projects deserves so much to be recognized, especially knowing that many of their ideas will never become part of their official game. Honestly, this inspiration has spread so far to even some of my own friends who have started creating their own Dark Worlds projects, imagining their own rooms on what could become a dark fountain opened inside them. And I think that's one of the greatest compliments you could give any piece of world building. When it doesn't just make people want to explore your world, it makes them want to create their own. I know this video was a little different from what I usually make. Normally I'd be trying to analyze some hidden piece of lore, but this time I just want to appreciate something I don't think gets nearly enough attention. I grew up with this game and fell in love with these characters and its world building. I wanted to make a dedicated love letter to this game somehow through this video, but hopefully it gives you a new perspective into loving Deltarune as a concept by itself. I have a huge feeling that this game is going to inspire many other pieces of indie media out there. I will admit I might be biased because I really enjoy the genre. People already praise it for being an incredible RPG and for telling a wonderfully written story, and those compliments are absolutely deserved, but I rarely see people stop to appreciate just how much creativity and passion is poured into this project. Toby has described Deltarune as a game that he's been wanting to make for years, and I think that passion really shines through. It's one they've genuinely poured their hearts into, and I think that's what makes it so special. The Dark Worlds are in many ways a form of escapism. That's what fantasy has always done, and I think that's what Deltarune is at its core. It's a giant creative work of art, built upon decades of inspirations. It celebrates the idea that creativity doesn't exist in isolation. It grows by taking inspiration from the things we love and transforming them into something new. Maybe that's why I love it so much.